Recently, it seems like we've entered something of a golden age for world building. Alongside a wave of new world builders, of course there's also been a wave of world building advice. I'm part of that today. And one piece of advice seems to reign supreme above all the others, which is to aim for internal consistency. It solves one of the major issues of world building. How do you make your world feel believable? How do you make it feel like it could really exist out there? Internal consistency solves this problem with meta-realism, you could say. The actual specific details of your fictional world won't be realistic. They'll be fantasy or science fiction or whatever else. But the way in which those ideas connect to each other can mimic the way that ideas connect to each other in the real world. In practice, what that means is that you're going to try to find a lot of logical connections between your ideas. The things in your world should have histories and contexts. They should be part of greater patterns that bind them all together into a cohesive whole. If you're a beginning world builder, your first instinct might be to just try to connect every single idea you have up to as many others as possible. And that will work. You'll end up with an internally consistent world, but depending on how you tackle it, you might also end up with some major issues. When things are too deeply interconnected, too tightly bound together, it can become difficult to work with them. How do you categorize ideas without dragging others along with them? How do you prioritize what should be considered changeable versus what needs to stay static for the world to retain its identity? And when you do go to change an idea, you're going to have to trace out all of the lines of influence, everything that it's tightly connected to see whether you need to tweak those ideas to avoid a contradiction. This can make working within the world kind of tedious and overwhelming. You get tangled up in all those connections that you've made between your ideas. Today, I'm going to share with you a method of organizing your ideas such that you'll maintain internal consistency and interconnectivity, but you will avoid getting tangled up. You'll keep things well organized and well prioritized. So let's get to it. Let's start by imagining that these coins represent the ideas that make up your world. You'll notice they're not all the same. The gold coins represent the most influential ideas. These might be ideas like laws of physics or magic if it plays that role. They're going to have an influence on everything else in your world. Second, we have these silver coins, which represent ideas with a lot of influence, but not universal influence. You could think of one of these as maybe representing the geography of a continent. It's going to have influence on a lot of things, on the weather patterns and the ecology, on the cultures of the people that live there. But if there are other continents thousands of miles away, it's not going to have much influence on those. And it's certainly not going to have any influence on the laws of physics. Finally, we have these copper coins, which represent the least influential ideas in your world. These are things that are small scale and specific. They may be very interesting and very compelling to you, but they don't have much influence on the other things in the world. Changing one of them doesn't require you to change much else. So, for an easy way to organize these, let's just move the gold coins to the bottom, move the copper coins to the top, and draw out the lines of connection between them. You'll see that they form a pretty distinctive pattern. It's like a branching fractal or a tree. Influence runs up from the gold coins, spreads out to the silver, and spreads out further to the copper. Now, the advantage of organizing things in this way is that you can focus on just one branch at a time. As you can see, they don't really connect to each other. So whichever idea you're working with, it's only going to have an influence of things directly downstream from it, things between it and the ends of its branch. If you prioritize the most influential ideas, the other ones should fall right into place. So if you've been following along, you might be thinking, okay, so I start with these gold coins, these universally influential ideas. But do I really want to rewrite the laws of physics for my world? I mean, that would produce a completely alien setting, something utterly unlike our real world, something unrecognizable. Where's the fun in that? And you'd be right. Luckily, we can solve this issue pretty easily. Any fictional world will have a point of divergence along this tree. Basically, the place that it stops being like the real world and becomes its own thing. If you're writing high fantasy, and you have a magic system that will actually influence everything in the entire world, that will have a universal effect, that's one of the gold coins. But maybe you have a magic system which is set in an urban fantasy world. The magic is confined to the secret part of the world where all the werewolves hang out, right? So it's not going to have universal influence. That would be a silver coin. It's the start of its own sub-branch. And if you're writing an urban fantasy world, you'd only need to focus on that branch. In maybe the most extreme example, if you're writing realistic fiction, where only a handful of characters are actually made up, and the rest of the world is actually exactly like the real world, then you could limit your world building to just the tips of the branches. But I don't know that there would be much point in doing world building if that's the kind of story you're writing. This will all be a little bit easier to understand if I walk you through some examples of how it looks to work within this framework. So that's what I'm going to do. I've come up with some examples, and I'm going to walk you through them. Let's go. I decided to start near the root of the tree with one of the gold coins, something that will affect the entire fictional world. I chose, there is a realm of mighty gods that is accessible to humans, but very distant and hard to reach. Next, I identified some branches of the world building that would be influenced by that root. I'm trying to move from a gold coin to a silver here. I figured culture would change, the religion would definitely be different, economics would be different, and there would be differences in how wars and conflicts are fought. I chose to explore this branch of economics. I worked from the question, how would having direct access to gods influence the economy? From here, it's world building as usual. Wealthy, powerful people could spend a lot of money to petition gods with big offerings, and then they'd use whatever miracles they received to make themselves even wealthier and more powerful. And for that reason, goods that a powerful god prefers as an offering would become really valuable and sought after. Peasant farmers might be forced to devote a certain portion of their fields to growing herbs for incense, or made to give prized livestock to the local lords to be sacrificed to their gods. To get a little more specific, let's say there's a god of destruction who will grant boons to people who offer up large enough quantities of human bones. Boons for bones, you might say. In times of war, when her services are in high demand and there are lots of corpses available, scavengers will collect bones from the battlefield. And in chronically war-torn regions, human bones, broken into evenly weighted pieces, might even be used as currency. And now we've reached one of these copper coins, a small, low-influence idea that's nonetheless interesting. The merchants can offer a bone-breaking service. You'll bring in like a femur or a rib, and they'll break it for you, cut it into even pieces, and keep any leftovers as their fee. So that's how it works if you want to start at the root at one of the gold coins and work your way out to the tip of one of the branches. That's maybe the easier way to do it. But if you're more ambitious, you can work in the reverse order. Let's say you have a world that already has ideas present, copper and silver coins, specific things with some influence, but you don't yet know what's at its point of divergence. You don't know what universally is true for that world, what brings it all together and makes it cohesive. We can figure that out by trying to find a pattern in the ideas that you already have, and then looking for the principle or the law that would explain that pattern. For our purposes, this is a way of discovery writing. To test out and demonstrate this method, I've come up with a few disconnected ideas which I'll then try to find a common cause for. First, I decided that in order to send a message or a request to a god, people write them down on something shaped like a flower. Words or symbols are inscribed on the petals made of paper, cloth, wood, or metal, and it folds up into a bud and can be sealed before sending. Second, I came up with a species of tree which will grow thousands of hair-thin thorns. It's commonly used as a centerpiece in people's gardens, but when I came up with it, I didn't know why. Third, I came up with the idea that powerful divine miracles will produce a substance like a fine white ash, which is collected for its ability to neutralize and defend against magic. Next, I looked at these three ideas and I tried to find ways to relate them to each other. The thorny tree can relate to the white ash, for example. Its dense thorns allow it to collect that ash that blows on the wind. People feel that having these trees coated in divine ash will help protect their homes from malevolent magic. For the rest, I was still left with some questions. Why do people write their messages to gods in such a convoluted way? Why would divine magic produce this strange substance in the first place? These questions point to something about the nature of the gods. That means that actually we'll be exploring farther up the tree than our previous starting point. It's time to deepen the root of this world. I decided that the ash could be a byproduct of divine magic, because it's what's left over when physical matter is used as fuel to power that magic. From there, I saw an opportunity to connect it to the geometric method of sending messages on flowers. Whenever a god uses their magic, it doesn't just turn matter into ash at random. It does so in a particular pattern, a geometry unique to that god. These patterns represent the god's way of thinking, like a language specific to their mind. So, in order to communicate well with the gods, it would help to organize your words according to their particular geometric signature. Thus, the flower messages. But there's still one more question. Why does divine magic use matter as fuel in the first place? That got me to a new root for the world-building tree. That the world was given its myriad forms and variations because it was imbued with the divine breath of magic at the beginning of time. Gods are beings that can inhale that magic, taking it out of the world and into themselves, and then use it to shape reality. When a god extracts power from physical matter, they return it to what it was before the birth of the universe, which is that white ash substance. And so that's how it looks when you want to work out of order. Of the two methods, I find the first one a little easier to use, and that the second one tends to produce more varied, interesting, or unexpected results. There's one more thing that I should probably talk about before we close out this video. Although earlier I said that the branches of the world will be mostly separate, that's going to depend on how you define them in the first place. And no matter how well you define them, you'll probably end up running into some places where they will intersect later down the line. This happened to me in my first example. I treated warfare and economics as two different domains, two different branches. But as I explored the economics, I ended up inventing a god who would be influential in warfare, this destruction god to whom we would offer bones. So, in the end, no matter how well you organize your branches, chances are there will be crossover. That's not something to be upset about. In fact, it's something to be excited about. These places where two seemingly distinct branches of reality are going to intersect, they'll do more than anything else to make your world feel internally consistent, to make it feel cohesive and believable. So now I'm going to go back into my example world and find another place that two branches would intersect, just to show you how it can look to work with those. For example, two domains of my story that should relate to each other would be the magic system and the economy. If communicating clearly with the gods requires using language in a specific way, it would make sense that the rich and powerful would employ scholars to study the unique language of each god, and to ensure that their requests are understood. That could create an upper middle class with a high proportion of these scholars of divine language. Specific families of linguists could specialize in the language of a particular god. When that god is being worshipped by many people, a family of linguists could become very influential. When that god is out of favor, they could lose their livelihood entirely. So, in that way, different branches of your world can converge and give it more depth. But the influence is still only going to flow in one direction. It's going to flow from the root of the tree to the branches, from the gold coins to the copper. As long as you keep that straight, you'll have no trouble keeping things organized. The more comfortable you get with that flow of influence, the more you can experiment with how you approach world building. The easier it will be. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please do those YouTube things, the liking, the commenting, the subscribing, and also the bell ringing. That's a lot of things. I don't know why they gave you that many things to do, but please do them anyway. And stick around, I'll have more videos out soon. Have a good one. Happy writing.